friends. Welcome to episode 294 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast is something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their commitment to support the podcast in Season 7. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, The Lazy Librarian's Guide to Creating Reading Culture, and my conversation with Hannah Webster. Hannah Webster, welcome to the podcast.
Yay, thank you for having me. Super excited.
You know, you and I were in the same space together a couple weeks ago, but we never actually got to chit-chat. I was at TASL, the Tennessee Association of School Librarians annual conference. You were there, and
I was.
For the 24 hours that I was there, I did not meet you, but I was a little aggressive and reached out to you and said, hey, what a fantastic session you presented. I'd love to share it with listeners.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for volunteering.
Well, it wasn't really a volunteer. I think I kind of fangirled a little bit whenever the email came through. I originally thought it was just the association saying something about, our presentations and everything. But then I clicked on it and I went, oh my gosh. I was so I did fangirl just a bit at that moment. So yeah, not creepy. It may be creepy that I'm the thing. I don't know.
Well, and friends, what happens is, oftentimes, and as Hannah has discovered, when you put all of this work into an amazing session and you present at your state conference, in my head, I'm thinking, I have a whole listening audience who would love to benefit from Hannah's hard work.
Hey.
You put together some great visuals, and I feel like I really have a sense of Hannah's library. And whenever, you put that kind of work together, obviously, your attendees at the session were very grateful for all the work that you put into that. But why not double dip and use what Hannah's put together and share it with our listening audience? I think you're going to find some really clever ideas, things that you can use in your spaces today. And I will be honest right now, friends, all I want to do is be an elementary librarian again, because I'm having some serious, it's just tugging on my heartstrings, because I look at this and I was an elementary librarian for 14 years. And I've since moved into the high school, and that's been an interesting transition. But at my core, oh my goodness, some of this really just makes me remember with fond memories of being an elementary librarian. So Hannah, would you introduce yourself? Tell us about your library, the grade you serve, and about your daily schedule, because I definitely want to have some follow-up questions about that.
Absolutely. So I am in White County, Tennessee. So I am a pre-K through 5 elementary librarian, and our pre-K services kids from age 3 and up. So we're a pre-K 3 through grade 5 school in the heart of Middle Tennessee. And this is my 6th year in the library, but it's my 18th year teaching. So I'd kind of flip-flop from you, Amy. I was a high school English teacher for 10 years and then made the jump over to elementary. So I went from teaching 18-year-olds to having 3-year-olds, and that was a pretty big leap. Sometimes they act the same. and the size is the only thing that's different. But hey, it is.
Friends, because we are K-12 certified, that's pretty uniform across the United States. I do have some very popular playlists. So we have an elementary playlist, we have a middle school playlist, we have a high school playlist, because when I was an elementary librarian, I needed to brush up on some high school strategies to apply for the job I now have. Vice versa. Also, a lot of folks find themselves teaching in middle, and they had never in a million years planned on teaching middle schoolers. We have those playlists in the show notes. And Hannah's episode will be included in the elementary playlist, just because foundationally, if you know you're moving into that group, that age group, there are so many things that are wonderful and to be celebrated, but also special like strategies and skills that work especially well with our littles, as opposed to, in this case, in Hannah, I did high school. I taught high school for 10 years before I became a librarian. So it was a leap. That's for sure.
Yeah. This is the club right here.
Exactly. So you're an encore teacher.
Yes, that's what we call it.
Mm-hmm. Would you explain encore? Because I always referred to myself as a specials teacher.
Right. So it's kind of the same idea. So the word that we choose to use is encore. I know it's specials. I feel like I've heard other words as well, but right now they're not coming to me. But what that is, within our school, we have 6 rotations. We have library, and they come to see me every 4 days. And then we have art and music. They have art and music every 8 days. We have PE. They get PE every 4 days. And now we have added computer science, and we also have guidance. So there's 6 classes of encore, and they are on an 8-day rotation schedule, and again, coming from the high school world to elementary, when you say you're on an 8-day rotation, I'm like, I'm sorry, you're what? Like, this makes zero sense in my brain. And when I try to explain it to people, they just give me this blank stare. I'm like, I'm sorry, you just have to live it, and then you get it. And that's pretty much all you can do. But every day, we serve as the teacher's planning time. And so every day at a certain scheduled time, we get the grade level, an assigned class from the grade level for 45 minutes. And the next day we get a different class from that same grade level for 45 minutes. And they just go, there's a rotation of encore teachers, and they go to a different one each day. So I know that makes it about as clear as mud. That is very much one of those things where I feel like in an audiobook, this would be referred to the attached PDF to see a visual of it. Because also in addition to that, there is a extended encore day to where once every 8 days, they have that day's encore for an hour and a half at the beginning of the day. And then our planning as an encore teacher falls to where their typical scheduled time is. So I do not have the same planning time every day. My planning time is different every single day. It follows the 8-day pattern, but it's different every day.
So forgive me, this extended encore time, and I saw that in your schedule. I'm dying to know, you have students for an hour and a half?
I do. And so what we do right now, and I even feel guilty saying this because I think we're still the only school in the county. Now, all of us in the county, we follow that same schedule, but at 9 o'clock, I have the best team of encore teachers. Like, they are some phenomenal people, and they are just really great in their fields. And we are all really strong believers in play for these kiddos. 9 o'clock every day, if it is available, we take the kids out to play for that 35, 40 minutes. I don't know who else does, but we do that if it's our big kids. And when I say, you guys will hear me refer to my bigs and my littles. I had one 5th grader last year who actually read Lord of the Flies, and I said, so now you understand why I call you guys little uns and big uns. He goes, yeah, I kind of get it now. The bigs in the winter, we do dodgeball tournament with them, and the littles in the winter, I just bring out extra toys that they don't get to see as often. I have a toy room, and they know I have a toy room, and so I typically have, tons of Legos, lots of Duplos, magnet blocks, magnet tiles. I have a dollhouse and a tree house because some of these little girls and boys have not played with dollhouses and tree houses before. I always keep a stash of a different coloring sheet every week, of paper for them to draw on, art supplies. So it's kind of like a free-for-all makerspace. And yeah, that's what we do.
Oh, I have questions because you still have dodgeball in school. Somebody hasn't sued the pants off of you. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. It's all right. So extended encore. Woohoo! Extended encore. And we move on. All right. Yes.
It's organized play.
That you bet.
Organized stations of play.
Well, and I think every parent is grateful you're tiring them out with physical exercise because the trend is such that listen to the news long enough and you know that our students are definitely grappling with a great deal of inactivity.
Right.
They're becoming as sedentary as their aged parents.
Right.
And at that age, we really, it becomes, I'm going to say this right now. The teachers who have them after extended encore are grateful that some of that energy has been worked out as early as it is in the day, because it's only going to make the classroom, environment far more, shall I say, subdued.
In a way, we've actually had big discussions about this, and we would love to flip-flop it to have extended encore at the end of the day. We just feel like that'd be super cool because our kiddos, how much children are creatures of habit, and especially the little bits, the little ones. When you move their encore that they're used to having at 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock, it's like they leave encore and go, "Is it time to go home now?" And you're like, "No, honeys." Like, "Are we done?" And so it really, I think the teachers have said it's like sometimes they just count that day as shot because like the kiddos, they're out of their rhythm. And so, yeah. So it has its benefits and drawbacks as well.
I was going to ask you because when I taught littles and, really your kindergartners come in right after lunch.
Correct.
Then they have rest time after that, right?
No, they go to recess right after that. They haven't had recess by the time we have them.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
When's rest time?
They don't have rest time.
Are you kidding me? All right, friends, in the state of Michigan, it is mandated that your kindergartners have a 25-minute rest period. And I think our teachers would quit. No. They would leave.
No, our pre-K kiddos have a designated rest period, but our kindergartners do not.
Yes, I've had to carry a few out of the library because when they fall asleep, you just leave them. You just leave them. They're fine.
And I'm having to sit there and look. And used to I could get away sometimes with reading 2 stories on the carpet to them, especially if they were engaging stories and stuff. Now I'm like, no. These little wiggles, they will not sit for more than 1 story. And I just have to sit there and say, they have not had playtime. They have not had playtime. They have, besides lunch, it has been work of some form for them since they've got there that morning. And so I'm like, okay, they're going to be wiggly. They're going to be wiggly. They're going to be ready to go. And encore, and I think this is great about all of our encores. Our encore is almost like their safe space. Not saying that their classroom is not at all, because I do love all of our teachers. I genuinely love all of our teachers. They are phenomenal. But I did tell in my session that day, I said, we're like the fun aunts and uncles of the school, and they get very used to us because it's almost like they know that they can collapse in there and it's okay, and so it's a spot like that. They can be a little bit more loose with us.
Well, and, the wonderful thing about teaching elementary is that we have that opportunity to build that relationship over years.
Yes.
And it's very unsettling when they get a new classroom teacher.
Yes.
It can be exciting, but it's unsettling. But they come back to that learning commons or the library and they just feel at home because they haven't had to learn everything all over again at the beginning of the school year. So no, I completely agree. So, friends, I'm going to say right now, I love interviewing people like Rachel because she clearly loves her grade level. And you're going to see when you get a chance to take a look at her amazing presentation. And friends, that is kind of the big ask that I have of guests who come on the show is, can I please share the presentation that you gave at your session? So we, as a listening audience, once you're done listening to this episode, do be sure to go into the show notes and check out this amazing presentation which Hannah put together. And I love it because it does include so many wonderful images that you can glean ideas and inspiration from. So, Hannah, in keeping with the spirit of your presentation, which is linked in the show notes, I absolutely want to use the precise wording of the title of your episode, which you submitted for consideration. Thank you very much. And you never felt at 1 minute the need to change it. The Lazy Librarian's Guide to Creating Reading Culture. I love it. And for listeners who are tuning in, the only thing they probably saw on their app was the Lazy Librarian. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know any librarians who are lazy. I really don't.
No, and yeah. And I think it's really tongue in cheek because, like, if you're a librarian, you know that is tongue in cheek. Like, you know it. But if you're not, you don't understand everything that goes into maintaining a library, especially if you are a teacher librarian, because you're fulfilling two roles at once. And like in our case, we don't have an extra assistant. I don't have a parent assistant or anybody else in there with me. So I'm teaching and I'm maintaining the facility and curating the collection and trying to build this culture all at the same time. And so, yeah, that's why I think I stuck on lazy librarians. Number one, you all know that, we're book nerds, we're reading nerds. Most of us who have taught before we go into library, we've came from an ELA background most of the time. Do love me some good alliteration right there. So, you had to have that. It had to be a little bit catchy. What you do has to be self-sustaining because you don't have the time to keep doctoring it and tweaking it and maintaining it. It has to be like, you got it? Good. We're going to keep rolling on, and it has to keep maintaining itself. Or it has to integrate itself so seamlessly into your curriculum or what you're planning on doing that it is not extra effort to do it itself.
Well, and what I took from your presentation, because friends, I knew I wanted to feature Hannah in an episode because I was presenting at the same time. I could not actually be in the room when she gave this session. But I'll tell you what I gleaned from these ideas, and we're going to talk about them, is that for you, when you chose the word like lazy librarian, it feels like you really did look around your space and you looked at it in such a way you're like, what can I do? What can I do that would not require a tremendous amount of investment? I didn't see any of your ideas as requiring an astronomical amount of additional funding into your space. Like I saw that many of these were intuitive. Many of these things they required your time, but there were also things that were not extraordinarily, outlandish, requiring grants and so forth. So I loved that you found solutions which every librarian could glean from and could incorporate in some way into their own space. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, your disclaimer page. I always love when somebody surprises me with something. It says, disclaimer, I am fully aware that other librarians do more and much cooler things than I do. This is simply what I know has worked for me, and I cannot wait to hear new, amazing ideas. And I think that's because at the end of your session, you provided opportunities for participation. Okay, cool. When it comes to creating reading culture, you started off with something that is so foundational, and that is your library layout. So let's go ahead and talk about the things that you have done when it comes to the configuration of your library. And friends, for those of you, I'll also include a link in the show notes to Diana Rendina's library space episode, because she also looked at how our spaces are configured and how we capitalize on the movement of our students to make sure that we are arranging what we do in a way that's most beneficial and increases access. So we'll put that link in the show notes as well. So let's go ahead, Hannah, and talk about your library layout, because it really does make so much sense.
My library is basically just a big rectangle. There are 0 windows. There is 1 entrance, 1 exit. Yes, I have 0 windows. And so I walked in and it's solid white walls and it's a concrete floor. And I have 3 storage rooms that were packed to the gills. So that's kind of what I had to work with. But as far as laying it out, one of my first big projects was genrifying my fiction. And I very slowly tiptoed into that. So what I did first was I color-coded all my fiction. And to color-code it, if I didn't know the book, I did look up summaries. I read the back cover of it because genrifying is so subjective. You're never going to find like an absolute true guide of this book is exactly this genre. And the kids and I talk about this all the time. I said, look, I can pull this book. I could pull Harry Potter, and we could put this into fantasy. We could put this into mystery. We can put this into, those are the only two within mine. Action adventure. I said, because I have 10 genres, I think, because that was just a good round number. I could put it into either one of those and validate it. So I just, I always tell my kids, I said, I pick what I feel is the strongest. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how we're going to roll with it. So after I color-coded them, and to color-code them, I just got the colored spine labels from Dimco and put them over the spine because I didn't want it to distract from it anymore. We did it like that for a year. I had a poster that I had up in the room that said, what do I want to read, with a list of each one of the colors. And at this point, too, I had not yet separated graphic novels out either. So they had their own color code for the first little bit. And I feel like I need to say, when I stepped into my library, like, side note here, I had probably 20 to 30 graphic novels, and that was it when I stepped in 6 years ago. I currently, I think the last time I checked, had between 400 to 500 graphic novels last time. So, that's been where we have grown the most.
Another thing is I love about those colored labels. So friends, again, look at the pictures. You'll see exactly, but it looks like colored tape, and it goes over, but you can read what's underneath it. And I love that because you're not taking up valuable real estate on the spine. It is so easy to go sticker happy and start to make it impossible to see what's written on the spine. And I totally agree. Genrifying really does empower our students because now they feel like they can at least be ballpark with the things. And I'm going to tell you that's true. My high school students too. We almost immediately, as soon as I got there, we genrified our high school collection. And it really does make I think it just takes their stress level down a little bit because now they feel like they're going to be at least in the neighborhood of something that interests them.
Yes, and it's like the kids don't come and just ask, they don't just go browse. They come to you and they say, hey, where are your scary books? And if you're not genrefied, you're like, well, they're not really separated. You got to go by the author. Do you know who you're looking for? And it's like, these kids don't know. They're just stepping into this, So I'm like, hey, it's red over there. Go get it. And, I just point to them and tell them where stuff is. And so it not just made it easier for them. And I've talked about this with other teachers before. I feel like the library is one of the first places in their lives that the choice is totally theirs. They don't get that in so many other places in their life. Like they're told what to do. Here's your assignment. Now here's your chores, which is fine. That's all within the realm of development and growing. But you get into the library and they get to choose. And not only do they get to choose, they're encouraged to choose. And no choice within reason is turned away. And the only reason I say within reason is when my I have kinders who come up and they just love the fact that this book is the biggest book in the world and it's this big as my head and can I read this? I'm like, oh, hey, we just hit 5 last week. That's awesome. I love Harry Potter too. Let's look at some other stuff that has some same things like this before we jump here. Or, the simple redirection you do as part of an educator, you kind of try to work within that. But to have that kind of choice, they don't get that anywhere else. And that's very freeing for them. And that allows them to branch out in curiosity. They get to explore what they are interested in with no strings attached. And so many times what they're reading and what they're looking at has assessment built into it. And I want them to know that you can just like it, and that's enough.
I love it. This next one is genius. This would have been a game changer for me. And but you numbered your shelves.
It was one of the first things I did because it
is so smart. Now, explain so it looks like you just took a piece of tape. Yeah. And you just wrote like a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, almost like the grocery store. You know, friends, how you have the aisles are numbered? Your bookshelves, like top to bottom, that's the number 1 shelf. That's the number 2 shelf. Genius. And tell me, like, I mean, obviously you've figured out, you can see the numbers. I'm going to tell you right now, I would have made those numbers much bigger.
Well, I didn't have any more space to make them bigger. And like with our genreified fiction, I've put the label color on the top of the, so like with our genreified, like I told you guys, I first put the stickers on the spine and they were still all mixed in. Since then, 2 or 3 years ago, I divvied them up. And that's the pictures you'll see now is they are all grouped. They're, alphabetical by author's last name, but according to genre. And so on the top of the shelf that they're on, I have covered the number with the same color as the spine label. So they can see too, hey, there's all this one, all the greens are on this shelf for fantasy and whatever. But like when it comes to like, I think my mysteries are purple. It's really hard to see the number through the purple. So I'm like, and I find the one that I can see the most. It's that one, and then I count backwards. It's that number there.
Well, and what it makes sense, and friends, when you are working with littles, and there's one of you, to be able to say, go to the shelf number 7, because they learn their numbers and they know their numbers.
Yeah. No.
And you don't want to give them letters because that'll confuse them when it comes to like the letters that are on the spine. So no, this makes total sense. I have some friends who use like a laser pointer, and they might point at the shelf. That might work, but by giving them a number, it's like being in the grocery store. We're going to go right over to this number, and now it's very intuitive for a little to figure it out.
I will say with my littles, the way that my shelves are, my picture books are on lower shelves. But the bad thing was, in my brain, it didn't work to start my little shelves with the number 1 because then I would be starting with like the number 13 on my big shelves, which if you see the pictures, it'll make sense. And so my little shelves are all like double digits. And I'm like, oh man, these kids don't know these numbers yet. And so I just did this within the last week. And I have went and printed out for my series that are not quite character series yet. Those are all in another section. But like Penelope Rex and Bruce the Bear, the Pigeon, Dr. Seuss, those that the kids are like, where are all your Dr. Seuss books? Where are the Pigeon books? Oh my goodness, the Pigeon books. I love the Pigeon too. I printed out their picture and I got a little popsicle stick and I like laminated the picture and I've stuck it out from that book so I can tell them to go look for the character's picture, and all those books are next to the character's picture. Because again, we got pre-readers and non-readers who are coming through. So as that evolves, I'll let you know how that's going. But because they may not know number 41 to go look for the pigeon, but I can take a look for the pigeon's picture and they find it.
Yeah. Well, and again, all of these visuals that are going to help, again, it's about empowering them. And then what's adorable is when their friends are like, oh, I'll show you. I know where that book is. And you get all these helpers, and they are so driven to be helpers, and everybody wants to feel like they can be helpful. And so, moving, I love what you've done. You've talked about how the graphic novels are now their separate section. You have an early chapter book, and this is really important because it is so, littles especially want to go and pick up those big books.
They do.
And they want to read chapter books. And, you also, I remember getting emails from parents who were like, please send me a book that I can read with my child, not to my child. And that makes so much sense. Of course, parents want to read books with their children so that their children become more capable. And there's a time and place for being read to, and there's a time and place when you want to read with.
Right.
So you call them early chapter books.
I do.
I've heard some people call it early chapter books. I think we definitely want to move away from the word easy. Yeah. Because, we don't use easy.
No, and I don't call my easy books the easy books. I mean, they're still marked with an E because that would be how many hundreds or thousands of books that I'd have to relabel. When I refer to them, though, when I'm talking to my kids, because they have an E, I use the everybody books. But to me, I know this is going to step on some toes. It's a little cringy to me. It's not my favorite. I just call them picture books. And if I could go back and relabel them with like a P, I would. But also the E is universal. That's what they're going to see in the public library. So I kind of stick with that Everybody books as far as that's why they're called that. But when I refer to them to my kids, I call them picture books because that's what the focus is on. Because we also do lessons on Caldecott and everything too. And we have this big talk about, book jackets and covers. And I've already told them how if they lift up the cover, it's like a secret message underneath the cover sometimes because it's a different cover. And so I've got all my kids looking underneath them now and they're covered. So I know, right? Fun. It is fun.
So, and you do use bins. The bins are really helpful. I imagine, am I right, that when you have your older students coming in at the end of the day, that they can help put things away in the bins?
And even my littles have started to get to where they know how to put stuff away, and I'll group stuff. Like I sort all the books out before I put them away, and I'll have kids say, I want to help. And so I was like, okay, this goes to the supernatural bin, which is all of our ghosts and witches and stuff like that. And this goes to these bins over here. So they can help with the bins. And some of my bigger ones, I do eventually start teaching them how to do other stuff too.
Sure. Well, and your signage is fun. I love it because you are using those visuals for your pre-readers, but you also incorporate it into your nonfiction as well. Because when I was an elementary librarian, I had a 50-50 checkout, meaning like really half of our checkout was going to be fiction and the other half was nonfiction. And it was so much fun because I'm a nonfiction reader. So for me, this made so much sense. But you've carried over those visuals for the nonfiction as well.
Yes.
So you did talk about purchasing something from Teacher Pay Teacher, and you would not be alone. I know more than a few people who have done this, but tell us about the one thing that you purchased on Teacher Pay Teacher, which has made a difference in your program.
Well, and it's shout out, I think it's Miss Reader Pants is who I purchased it from, and I'm hoping that it's hyperlinked in the presentation within the notes because she deserves the credit for this, but it is a genre personality quiz. And so with my 4th and 5th, and again, you can judge your 3rd graders and their maturity level and their kind of reading and see if they can do it as well. She's designed it to do 3rd through 5th, but I stick with my 4th and 5th grade. And it's a 12-question personality quiz where you get to answer these different questions like, hey, what would your favorite ideal pet be? Just really fun, goofy questions. And at the end, you add up your score and it gives you your genre personality. And so for those kids who are just starting to kind of tiptoe into chapter books and fiction, they may not know what they like yet. It kind of gives them this beginning entrance into it. And she has within her packet, that if you purchase it, she has descriptions for each genre. And then she has also made bookmarks that she updates every year with lists of chapter books and even picture books and early chapter books for your lower readers within each genre. And so we've done that. And this year I printed it out and I sent it to all of our teachers. And I said, hey, just for kicks and giggles, let's do this. And I made a presentation for all of our teachers. And also on their quiz, I asked them to list their top 3 favorite kids' books or books that our kids would have accessed. So I had a pretty good participation rate. Not everybody participated, but I've sent them off to a printer to have them printed, and I'm hoping to hang them up next week for parent-teacher conference so all the kids can connect with the teachers to say, hey, this is what they are. I'm this too. And I also want to eventually go and get pictures of the teachers holding their favorite book. Again, I have to think pre-readers and non-readers. And you have mentioned ELLs. I always forget to mention that. We don't have a ton of ELL kids within our school. Our county ELL teacher stays at one county. She was traveling and they found her a spot in one school. And so sometimes, absolutely, you can use that for those kiddos as well. Just if I overlook it, I apologize. I just haven't had to think in that realm yet.
So I love this next one. The 40-book challenge is terrific because you get a glimpse of Hannah's circ desk. And it's wonderful. I absolutely love it. So talk about the 40-book challenge and why this is so important to building a reading culture in your school.
Yeah, so I heard about it, 5 or 6 years ago, whenever I was first introduced to Donalyn Miller's book, The Book Whisperer, and she talks about it. And I think I linked that article as well within my presentation, so you can dive into that a little bit deeper. But with my 40 book challenge within our library, I challenge my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders to read 40 books over the course of the year. And with their goal being that if they meet these 40 books, they get a gift certificate to one of the book fairs. And I just say one of the book fairs because if they finish, it depends whichever one they finish the closest to, I'll go with that book fair. But it's not just a free-for-all. They don't just get to list 40 books and say, hey, look, I did it, because I have to have them accountable. So, and again, all of this is in the presentation. It's in some of the included works as well. I made a list so they would sample a little bit of everything. And they have I don't know, within the chapter books and fiction.
You ask them to read, and I don't know how much you've, drawn directly from the Book Whisperer, but we have in the 40 book challenge, the students need to read 2 poetry books, 4 realistic fiction, 3 mystery or spooky books, 3 fantasy books.
Fantasy, I've modified for them to be fantasy or action adventure. So some of those that are so niche, like I think of spooky, and I always tell them, I said, hey, spooky's not my forte. I said, you are forcing me to read something when I have to read a scary book because I do not like to be scared for scared's sake. Give me a mystery where I can be scared for a purpose to solve a problem, but not just scared to be scared. I said, so on those very niche genres, I gave them an either or.
That's great because likewise, I don't read scary stuff. All right, cool. 5 graphic novels. Thank you very much for validating graphic novels of reading. And oftentimes we are not only educating our teachers, we're educating the parents as well. And if parents are smart, they're going to be like, reading is reading. And, this high school librarian, everything I've checked out today was manga. So I'm telling you right now, friends, reading is reading. All right. 2 historical fiction, 2 biography or autobiography. And then, and I love this, 9 nonfiction. And for me, I would be all over that nonfiction. And then here's the best part. You document your own progress on your circ desk.
Yep.
And so the students can see what you're reading and it motivates them and it gives you something a shared experience you can talk about.
Well, and I show them too on my circ desk. Like if you zoom in on that picture on my circ desk, the one where it says
did.
Your choice. So your choice, they get 10 of their own choice.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so I told them, I said, guys, if you're just trying to get your numbers up, go and read 10 Elephant and Piggies. I don't care. It can be whatever you want to read. So purposefully on my board, my choice is all picture books because I counted the ones that I read to my littles. And so as I would read them to my littles, I would post the picture up there. And so they would see that and it would be validated that they could read a picture book and it still count for their 40 book challenge because I was doing it as well. And the same thing on my poetry and my biographies. I think most of those are all picture books as well. And again, they're ones that I would read to the kids throughout the year. And so typically what I would do, and I didn't have one on my desk at that moment, but I have a little mini frame that I put Miss Hannah is currently reading with a picture of the book in front of my computer. And then just whenever I finish reading it, I cut it out and I stick it on my circ desk.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, and I'm sure that from year to year, you have students who do this every year. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Tell us about your book character day.
So book character day happens on Halloween. Now, this year, I think we're trying something a little bit different, doing something different with our kids for Halloween. But for our last 2 years, it's been well, no, the kids don't get to dress up for Halloween. And it's a bummer. I was like, can I do a book character day? I mean, I can validate a lot of costumes with a book. And the last 2 years, we have allowed to do that. And so it's been fun. A lot of kids do it. I do put an optional donation of $1 for the library. And again, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning, but it's in my slides as well. We're a Title I school, which means that we have to we receive federal funding based on our low-income students. And so we are a very high percentage. I think we are 75% low-income students. I don't want there to be a barrier to participation. So it's an optional donation. If they would like to donate to the library, awesome, but you don't have to. You can still participate and enjoy the fun of the day without having to donate. With that being said, I think last year I made $8. So, they take optional very seriously.
Yes, they do.
They do.
But I do like the fact that if they want to dress up on Halloween, they're encouraged to dress up like a character in their stories.
Yes, and I think I included a few pictures on that one. Oh, they're cute. Oh, those little babies come through and they are so cute. And my teachers are really into it, to the fact where we changed it up this year and we're doing a Decades Day instead. So, but I had already had teachers working on their book character day, and they're like, we don't get to do it because we're doing Decades Day. And I already had my costume planned out. And I was like, oh, no. I said, that was out of my control. I'm so sorry. But, how awesome that they're still thinking about it and doing it and everything. So I loved that.
I think you need to just have that, maybe because Halloween is Thursday. I think Friday should be your staff book character day.
Or we could always push it to March and do it during Read Across America.
There you go.
I mean, so,
all right.
Yeah, I think it can
absolutely.
It can still come in there. It doesn't have to be Halloween. It can be brought in to something else.
Talk to me about Forever Books, because this is something that I know other librarians have found to be an incredibly powerful and emotionally charged sort of activity when you are doing Forever Books with your students.
So our Forever Books are books that are weeded from the library. And, you think you love weeding until you get into the middle of it. And then you're like, well, but I love this book. Or, oh, look at this. And my personal, the American Girl books are my story of, I had a hard time weeding some of the American Girl books because that is what I grew up with. And those were near and dear to my heart, was Samantha Parkington and Felicity Merriman. And what do you mean that they are now 30-something years old and these children these are brand new? So existential crisis and sentiment kind of both going into that. But when you go through and you weed books, sometimes you feel like you're throwing them away. And this way, you're not. I'm giving them back to the students. And so I'll weed the books, remove them from my computer, and then they go on the Forever Book cart that I typically roll out about once, maybe twice a semester, depending on how thorough of a weeding job or how many extra books I need to get rid of at the moment. There have been times where I've planned it perfectly and did it during book fair so that my little babies who couldn't buy something could go pick from the Forever Book cart, and they still got to leave the book fair with the book. So when I'm really on top of things, that has worked out, and that's very serendipitous when it does. We call them Forever Books because all the books in the library are free, and so that way it does not get confused with a library book that's free already, so it's a Forever Book because you don't have to bring it back. And since we've started doing this, I've had teachers start donating books to give as Forever Books. I've had parents bring in books when they have found out, wait a minute, you mean you'll take my books? And I say, yes, I will. I said, I'll go through anything that I can keep to put into circulation. I'll put into circulation, but if it's okay with you, everything else that is left over, I will put in Forever Books to give to our kids. And they say, do it. And I give so much peace of mind to those people because the books have another life somewhere else. And you can clean out a lot. I cleaned out 2 full sets of 1983 encyclopedias in one day with Forever Books. I am sure I am every parent's favorite for that. Very few things go in the trash. They get to go home.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, nostalgia. Librarian nostalgia is the worst. It is.
Man, it's a beast.
I have found some books that I pulled from one of my elementary libraries, particularly Bread and Jam for Francis. And I couldn't let go of the books. I was like, nope, these are coming home with me. And absolutely. But the fact is that you are providing a very important service to the students, and creating that home library is so vitally important, and it validates all of the important messaging that we're sending with our students, that reading is important, and all of a sudden to give them that collection that they can keep at home. And I've talked to some other librarians who work in Title I schools for whom, especially when you realize the book fairs aren't fair, and talking about being able to make sure that everybody gets books whether they have money or not. And so I like some of the solutions you've come up with, because obviously you're helping everybody.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your literacy event.
Yeah. So literacy events come with us through Title I. So through Title I, we're required to do 2 literacy events throughout the year, one in the fall, one in the spring. And it's our, we call them RTI teachers, response to intervention, which are the teachers who are kind of in charge of maintaining and curating and really just kind of focusing on the data of student test scores and grades, and really watching those kids who need to be brought up. Where are they? Where do they need to be? So they're kind of our team as far as the development of literacy nights. And so I'm just more of a collaborator with them. I think I'm the ideas person sometimes, whenever they have exhausted their ideas, because they've been doing it longer than I have. I'm still a fairly new person to the world of elementary. And so we last year decided to focus some of our literacy funds towards One School, One Book. And I know that's not a new idea at all, but it was the first time we'd got to do it in quite a while. And they were running out of ideas. What book should we get? And they were asking me, how many, so what's the $1 book at Scholastic? I said, there is not a $1 book at Scholastic. Well, what's the cheapest? I said, $3 to $4, and it's not coming in bulk. And so they were just, oh, I was like, yeah. And so I introduced them to First Book, and they said, well, what about this one? Is this one here? I was like, no, this one that I don't even know what the title was. It's not there. They're like, well, what do you think? I said, oh, let me tell you what I think. And so I found Flora and Ulysses, and it was one of the cheaper ones. I said, it's going to meet all of them. I said, you got 5th graders who are interested. I said, and the 5th graders have heard it because I read the entire novel to them in 3rd grade. I said, and it's going to hit your younger kids too, because it's so easily understood and it can be very engaging. So I said, this one. So we bought every kid a copy of Flora and Ulysses, and every teacher. And then all of our, events surrounded that. We'd dress up as a superhero to kick it off that day. And the kids had daily reading quizzes with prizes. And then at the end of it, I forgot we were talking about animals and superheroes. And I remembered here in Middle Tennessee, we have a program called Animology. And Animology is a wildlife education program that focuses on educating children. And every year they come to multiple summer library programs within Tennessee. And I'm sure they travel out of state as well. And I said, well, what if we did this? And they said, what? I said, if I can get in touch with them, what kind of budget do I have? And they said, well, we have this much money. And I said, this will tie in, and these kids will love this. None of the other teachers, besides like maybe 2 or 3, had seen it before. And I'm like, hey, y'all, I set my summer schedule around when Animology comes to the library, okay? When my children are grown, I will still show up at this program, because I love it. And the man who runs it, his name is Bob Tarter. He comes, he brings 5 I say wild animals. This year we had a domesticated animal, but who are animals that are either grown in captivity or rehabilitation animals that cannot be re-released into the wild. He brings 5. He talks about them. And I said, hey, Bob, I need you this year. I want you to gear it towards animals, superheroes, and their super strengths, because we've read a book that he said, done. Changed his whole program for us, brought us 5 different animals.
When it comes to these animals with superheroes, I'll read them off the webpage. Friends, I am getting an education today. You have the silky chicken, the Gila monster, the black-tailed prairie dog, the buteo, and the mountain coati.
Coati. Yeah. And I think they usually say like a coati or something, maybe as like a abbreviated form of that. But yeah, he brought them all, and the kids loved them. And shout out to that program. We paid them for 2 programs because he said, I don't usually do it with a crowd of more than 350. That's my max, because of, so everyone can see. And so the animals stay calm. And I said, okay, we've got 500 kids, so that's going to be 2 shows. And I said, great. And I said, hey, we have a high population of special needs kids. So within our school, we have probably close to, 3 full pre-Ks, 3 full kindergarten, through probably 70 plus children who are in special education CDC classes exclusively. And that is not counting the other 60 to 70 kids who have IEPs that are serviced through other programs through the school. when I told him, I said, we have this very high population of special needs kids who do not do well in a general setting because of all the stimulation. And he stayed for a third show and did it just for them. So when he reached out again this year and he said, when can I come to Woodland again? I said, oh, we have based the entire program for next year around him. And so this next year, I had this really great idea. And I was talking to my guidance counselor because she and I like scheduling, doing our programming together. And I said, what if for our literacy night, we did one called Paws and Claws? I said, and so our literacy night that we're going to do in 2025 is going to be, we're going to reach out to teachers. We have at least 3 certified service dogs within the county that go to the school systems. We're going to bring them in and put them in a different space. I have a bearded dragon. We have one teacher who has guinea pigs that come to school regularly. We have one teacher who has Madagascar hissing roaches. We're going to reach out and say, hey, let's look at what kind of critters we can bring in that are either trained, like our service dogs, to be within that setting or are contained. Put them in different rooms. Let's pull a children's book that relates to that animal. So like if I'm reading, my dragon's name is Smog because I'm a literary nerd, so my bearded dragon, his name is Smog. So if Smog and I are in the library, I'm going to go pull Dragons Love Tacos, and that's going to be the story that I read at my station to my kids. And so have them visit each one of the animal stations or the rooms, get a little stamp or do an activity that goes along with that. And then at the end, or maybe like do a page. At the end, put together their own little storybook and maybe have a little printout or a little stuffy animal that they can go home and practice their reading aloud to say that they are a certified Paws and Claws reader. And then at the end of the week, we have the Animology coming and doing the presentation again.
Love it. I do. I mean, it's going to be an amazing program, and I love that idea. Let's talk about your Read Bowl, because Read Bowl is really cool. And I love that, and friends, there's so much information on this particular slide. I mean, this really is something that somebody could read this. They'll zoom in on all of the amazing things you've done and then customize it for their space. But Read Bowl, do you time this with like the Super Bowl? Yeah. Is this a football thing or what is this?
It is a national program sponsored by Malcom Mitchell, who was a football player. He did play in the Super Bowl. I am so sorry. I don't sports often. I cannot remember teams. Really sorry. But he is now a children's book author. He has written 2 picture books called one of them was The Magician's Hat. His second one is My Favorite Book in the Whole World. And if you started off with reading My Favorite Book in it's either whole world or entire world. It's about a little boy who can't find the book he wants. So he writes the book he wants to read. And that's kind of the inspiration behind the Read Bowl. So nationally sponsored, you turn in your minutes through the website that I think is included on my slides there.
Yeah, I can put it in the show notes.
Awesome.
No problem.
You submit your minutes every single month and you compete with kids across the nation. And then at the end of the 4 weeks, he announces the winning school on the halftime at the Super Bowl. And so,
wonderful.
Of course, this year, my kids were all pumped up. And then he visits the winning school. Like, we're going to get the visit. And, they're all hyped up. I'm like, guys, we're really surely just doing this just to kind of get you guys to read, And then we had 9 snow days in a row. And so, I had to break to the kids, hey, look, we're probably not winning nationally, guys. This is what's happening. I'm sorry. But to still keep them motivated, we did, again, free incentives. And so it was we had it as a grade level competition. And I counted all of the minutes that the kids turned in individually, but not just that. I emailed every teacher and I said, tell me how much you read in your classroom every day. I'm going to multiply it by 5, and I'm going to put that on your grade for every single week. And so then I had teachers saying, hey, we had extra time in IE today, so we had 30 more minutes and there were 25 kids in my class today. And I'm like, yes. So our 3rd and 4th grade teachers really got into it because they're a very competitive group because they're right next to each other. The winning grade level, we promised them a week of outside encore when the weather got good. And so that's free. That is, and I okayed all of this through administration before we even suggested it. And since it was a 4-week-long program and I wanted them to stay involved, we did the weekly winners, even though the grand total was happening at the end. Whoever read the most for the week had their own prize that would occur. Usually I scheduled it for the Tuesday of the next week. That gave them Monday to be reminded about it. But it was if you won the first week, you got your grade, had pajama day. the next week. And it was usually Tuesday, so you had Monday to remind them, and then it could happen on Tuesday. And then if you won week 2, you got a hat day. And if you won week 3, you got something else that was free. That also, you want to remove barriers for those kids who don't have a lot. Pajama day is a great equalizer. Everyone has pajamas of some kind. Hat day is typically, so you want something that's accessible for every kid, no matter station or income or anything. And yeah, to encourage participation. So
wonderful.
We had those incentives building up to it.
I love your battle of the books. This is so much fun. And this is clever. You do nonfiction versus fiction. What is your best advice when it comes to your battle of the books recommendation?
It took me forever to figure out how to lay out my brackets, because I really wanted to do a battle of the books, because in Tennessee, we have the Volunteer State Book Award, and then the kids, go through that. I didn't know how to incorporate that into my classes because I didn't have the time to read tons of novels to them. I didn't have the funding to supply multiple copies of each novel for each student, but I still loved this idea of a book competition. So whatever I did, I needed to be able to read it within the space of 45 minutes, 2 books within the space of 45 minutes. And I wanted to make sure that when these kids are comparing the books, we're not comparing apples and oranges. We got to figure out a way to kind of cluster them together. And it's kind of embarrassing how much time I spent on it before I went, Hannah, your divisions are nonfiction and fiction. Like, come on. And once I kind of figured out that, I went, oh yeah. So I did 2 biographies or autobiographies. I did 2 animal books, because those always go really well. Or I think I just labeled them as nature. That is one thing I wish I would have put on my bracket that I included the image of, was kind of the subcategories within each division. So nonfiction was biographies went against each other, and then nature books went against each other. And then on the fiction side, I did funny books were my first 2. I think it's The Very Cranky Book and Pirate and Penguin, which if you are not reading that one aloud to your littles, do yourself a favor and do it, because, oh my goodness, it is so much fun. And then Pretty Books is what I told them it was. So they were 2 either Caldecott nominees or Caldecott Award winners. And so each time that we read these books aloud, I kind of gave them different standards to read them with. Which one was it was always which one was the most interesting, which did you enjoy the most. But especially when we got to fiction and like the pretty books, I said, I want you to look at the illustrations. And when you look at the illustrations, is it important to the story? How does that work into the story and stuff like that? So last year I did it, and the publishing dates were kind of all over the board. The winner was Jump, the Michael Jordan biography, because we got lots of Jordan fans. And it was published in, I think, 2002 or 2000. It's an older book. But going into it this year, now that I kind of figured out my format, I would love to keep the books all published within the previous year. So this year, our March Madness, or our Battle of the Books, I'm going to try to keep it as all 2024 published books.
And you read all of those books to all of your classes?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
I do.
All right.
I read all of, and I do it because, I see them, it takes me 4 weeks.
Okay.
Because I see every class every 4 days, pretty much. And so both of those books had to be able to be read within that class period. And I usually do not try to keep my kids reading for more than 20 to 25 minutes, because that's about their attention span. So I need to be able to read both of the books within 20 to 25 minutes. And so it takes me about a whole month, because I read both the books, we vote, tally, do the winner. But that's 4 weeks of going, one set of books every 4 days, pretty much. So that takes me 4 weeks. I don't reread them for the next, like the semifinals and the final, but I leave the books on the shelf and we vote again. And I will remind them, okay, remember these two? These 2 are going against each other. Remember these 2, these 2. So yeah, it's a small part of the lesson after the initial reading.
I love this next idea, but I know not everybody will be able to implement it. And it's the yearbook design. So your students are invited to submit a design for the yearbook. I think that's fantastic. I imagine you have some literary tie-ins. You've got students who want to. No.
Well, it's so whenever I was interviewing for this job, they were like, would you be willing to do yearbook? I'm like, yes, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'll do the yearbook. There's times where you say things to get jobs and you're like, why did I do that? In all honesty, it does take a lot of time to do the yearbook, yes. I'm one of the only people in that school who knows every single kid. And so, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. In a way, it does. But, and I always use the stock covers and everything like that for my first 4 years. And then we had a girl in one of our CDC classes who was just this brilliant artist. She used the most vibrant and high saturation of colors. I always loved watching what she did. And we teased one day, she and one of the assistants and I were all sitting there, and her assistant said, hey, maybe you should have her design your yearbook cover. And I said, you know what, maybe I should. And I did. And I had her draw and color my yearbook cover that first year. And all the kids were like, wait a minute, what? One of our kids did that? And oh man, like she was so proud of herself, and she should have been. It looked great. And it really kind of created this interest in the kids. So I went, huh. So I opened it up and I said, all right, submit them to me. And without even asking for submissions. And so they submitted last year. I had one kid who worked really hard on it, and he submitted by the deadline. No one else really did. And I was like, oh, I need more than a little bit more. So then I created like little paw print templates, and they colored those in and submitted those. And I chose like 1 or 2 from each grade level and kind of made them go across the cover with it. And then I just list all the student illustrators on the back of it. This year, I already have had a kid submit it. And I usually pull in the art teacher as one of my judges as well. But it's reaching out to the kids, making them proud of their school, making them proud of what they can do.
I love this idea, and I've seen it work. You have a dedicated space to celebrate your student authors in your collection.
Yeah, so this was kind of a accidental aha moment. And I had a boy one time. He was in 2nd grade at the time. And his mom had self-published something that he wrote when he was little. And he brought it in kind of for a show and tell that day. And I said, that is so cool. I said, why don't you sit down and read it to us? And so he sat on my reading bench and read the book to his whole class. Those kids thought it was so cool. The next day I had like 3 kids come in and say, I wrote a book too. And so I said, okay. And every time somebody wrote a book, they got to read it to the class. And then I took the book and I entered it into my computer system with them as the author. I gave it a spine label and I gave it a barcode. That's free. And their book goes on the shelf. Now, it doesn't go into the shelf. I have its own little special nook. And I made the mistake of my first one who I barcoded that it got checked out and it never came back. And I thought, okay. So now I'm like, if you submit it, it does get its own barcode. The only person who can check it out is the author. And if the author decides to leave it, when these kids are seniors, if they're still here within our school system, they do a senior walk where they dress in their cap and the gown and they come back to their elementary school. I thought, I'm going to label these by year and I'm going to have them available for the kids when they do their senior walk. That's what I'm hoping to do and develop it into. So, and some kids come to me and they say, I want my book back. And I say, okay. Okay. Yeah.
But what a wonderful thing. And it's validated by the librarian, the keeper of the books, the person who has all the books, and now their book is in the library too. I love that. You bring in guest speakers, you bring in guest readers. This is wonderful. I think that it's a really exciting thing and allows kids to bring in people that they enjoy. Would you have any, expert advice to anybody when they are thinking about bringing in a guest speaker or a guest reader?
Look to your locals, because all of my guest speakers and readers are local people. My husband is a park ranger, which also means that he is kind of the expert in multiple different forms of programming, whether it be nature, but within Tennessee, our state parks also do a ton of historical programming. And so he has come in and done programming on Native Americans and World War I, because those are two, because we have Alvin C. York State Park, and one of our closest friends is the manager of that park. And so my husband is one of the main guys who goes up and helps with programming whenever we do programs at Alvin C. York. And so he'll come in and do programming there. We had a student who, not our student, but there was a local, now she's graduated, she's in college now. During COVID, one of our high school students wrote and self-published her own novel. And it's done great. And she's writing, there's going to be 5 eventually. And she's come and read them to our class before. So I've had her, and then she signs her books and leaves them on the shelf. And then I've also had her write little notes. I said, go write notes underneath your favorite books in the library. And we put those on the shelf, like, this is my favorite, because it's so, like, she was labeling Harry Potter and Chronicles of Narnia and other books that encouraged her when she was writing. She is now one of the public librarians. So she's working on her library degree, and she has just stepped into the children's library position in our public library. But she'll come and do that for us. So guest speaker, we have, grandmothers who want to come in and read to kiddos. We have the public librarians who want to come in and read. So really just look to your community. That's it. It doesn't have to be an author visit that you pay $1 million for. It can be these other people who really want to encourage literacy within their school system, and the kids love them.
So I love that you do, these look like certificates that would be shared with the students at the end of the school year. What awards do you give out?
So this past year, I gave out, so I have these two little boys. This is what encouraged me to do these awards. I have these two little boys who are in one of my special education classes. Their reward for good behavior was getting to come to the library. And they worked their tail ends off to be able to come to the library every day or two. And I thought, I really want to honor these two boys who would come, because they were just, I loved them. And when I started looking at how many books they checked out, all of a sudden I started noticing, wait a minute, this kid checked out this many and this kid checked out this many. So I did the most checked out books. I recognized those. And I recognized my top, I think 6, because I think I had a tie for maybe 5th place or something like that. Or I recognized that they had a certain number or above. Maybe I can't remember what it was. I will tell you, of my top 10, 9 were boys. And so whenever I got up and I presented at awards day, I said, I want to let you girls, I said, I don't want to, girls, I'm not diminishing it, and I'm, anything, but I said, I want you guys to know that when they tell you boys aren't reading, they are. Okay? So just, I don't want to say like, cool your jets or anything, because let's keep encouraging them to read, but we're going the right way. And so I did those awards. I recognized the 40 Book Challenge winners, just so they got public recognition. I got to kind of pitch the program again. And that allowed me to recognize students who didn't always get recognized. Like so I had kids who had never had their parents come to an assembly before to be recognized for an award, who were able to come and see their child be recognized for something.
That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so and then for my 5th graders, I didn't put this on there because I forgot about it. But for my 5th graders, this group, I had them since they were in 1st grade. I went through and I looked up how many books every single 5th grader had checked out from the time I had them. I went and looked back in my computer system, and I said, and I wrote them a letter. And I copied and pasted the letter for every 5th grader, but I included the first book they checked out with me, the last book they checked out with me, and then how many they checked out total at their time.
I love that. That's wonderful. And again, this is about truly and selfishly, you're raising the profile of the value of what you do, of how just what it means to be the librarian in the building, and reminding families and your administrators that you are an important person in these children's lives and part of their reading journey, and that consistency of service, that you've been able to be there for them as this child has gone from being a little to being big. I love this last bit about bookends, because our students are so task-oriented, and I'm not lying when I said when I taught elementary, I had upwards of 50 kids who worked in the library at any given point of the day.
So my bookends are, this year they're all 5th graders, but again, kind of a happy accident. Last year I had a couple of kids who, our school is very loud, just by default. We are a large school, and with a large sped population, sometimes you just have noise. And that just happens. That's part of it. We are a very loud school. And I would have kids who are like, hey, waiting in here for parent pickup, I'm a little overstimulated. And they're like, I just want quiet. And I'm like, man, I feel you. I want to stay in here too, but I got to go work parent pickup. And they would just naturally, some of these kiddos would just naturally start cleaning, like, hey, I saw a mess, and so I cleaned it up. And I'm like, okay. Said, if you're going to clean up for me every day, you can stay in here. And they would. And so I started, but then they were all kids who I'd already had relationships with and like had built this rapport with over the last couple of years and trusted them in there. And then I would have kids be like, well, I want to stay too. And I'm like, oh, I don't want everybody staying. Don't want everybody just trying to hang out in here without me, because that was the other thing. I'm not in there. I have to go do parent pickup every day. And so this year, to kind of cut down on that, I made a form. And if they wanted to be, and then we gave ourselves a name. We were the bookends, because they came at the end of the day. They had a form they had to fill out. Parents had to sign on it. Administration had to sign on it. And they had to have 3 teacher recommendations. And so those were turned in and collected. And those are the kids who get to come every day at the end of the day. Last year, I rewarded them we do 3 book fairs a year. My last book fair is a buy one, get one free. And so I told them, I said, go pick out any book you want. And that's it. And that gets 2 books for that. Of course, this year I've already had my bookends going, so I get to pick out anything I want at this book fair right now. And I say, no, May.
Funny. Of course they're going to ask you that. Of course
Of
they
course.
are. I love that. So and you made sure to mention at the end of your presentation the importance of signage in building excitement for what you do, because our students are so visual
They are.
and that's how they are able to orient themselves in your space, and it encourages them to use those reading skills.
When they're visual learners, that's what we've talked about before with graphic novels. It's another, they're going to look at it if you put a sign with it. If you just put words, nah.
Well, and I do have to ask, your last slide. I love this, your last slide. And this is so affirming, because it is a wonder. And I'm going to say, like, this is something I would print and put in my office on my door, so that when I walk out, it's the last thing I see before I leave the sanctuary of my workspace. And it says, you are the most important facet of promoting reading in your school. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this needs to be cross-stitched on a pillow. This needs to be in my office. I'm going to put it where I can see it before I go and start my day and say, yes, I am the reason why my students are going to read more today than they did before, because of the things I will actively do.
Yeah, it's not just your personality that draws them in, which it is part of it. A lot of it is that relationship that you build, bringing them there. But they keep coming back because you've affirmed what they've chosen, you've showed excitement over it, and you're walking the line you're asking them to walk. You're buying in. Somebody else may say, well, do this. We'll do it because I told you to. And I'm like, hey, read this book because I just read this book and I think you're going to love it and I'm really excited about it. So when you kind of nerd out to promote reading, to promote books, when they see that you are genuinely like, hey, I love books and I'm also a librarian, that's cool. Not just I'm a librarian, so you should love books too. Like when they see that buy-in, they're going to be like, okay. She's walking it as well. So, I mean, that's part of that 40 book challenge, and posting it up there like, hey, I'm not asking you to do what I'm not going to be willing to do myself.
So, Hannah Webster, I'm going to ask one more favor of you. Can I ask for a favor? Would you do a single slide of this last message that says you are the single most important facet of promoting reading in your school? And I would like you to put your name at the bottom of it, so that when I print it and put it in my office, and forgive me, but if I may, share it on social media. And when people replicate it, it has your name on it. It says Hannah Webster on it, please. Because I think that this is something that other people would like to put in their space. They can print this slide, and it is a celebration of us and the value of what we do every day. And it is an important thing. It's affirming, because we have to remind ourselves that sometimes work is hard, but it is so vitally important that we are there today and every day for our students.
Well, we've talked about this, like, I say we, I'm not sure who this royal we is that I'm referring to right now, but like with everything librarians are facing still right now with book banning, and, we just had a county remove 400 books, not our county, but a county close by in Middle Tennessee, pull 400 books off the shelves within their county. Whenever you're facing things like that, it's really easy to think, you know what? Why bother? People are just going to, pull this off the shelf, and I'm just done. I'm done fighting it. I'm tired of it. Whatever. You have to sit there and think, but who else is going to be there for these kids? Who else is going to show them that importance and that love and say, you know what? Yeah, this is tough. There are trials, but you know what? I'm still here, and I'm the biggest advocate, not just for these kids, but for these books. And if I leave, what's happening? And so that's part of it too. Like, it's going to get tough, but you're the most important thing in that library to stand up for those kids, for their rights, and to make sure they have access to everything they need. And if they lose you, what do they have? I mean, hopefully they have something, but you know what I mean? Just, you got to be there.
Hannah Webster, you are so fantastic. And I'm so grateful that friends, we are coming up the end of a long week. And what I didn't mention is, Hannah, where are you in your book fair circus that you're hosting right now?
So, yeah, today was our third day of book fair circus, and I kind of flew in on two wheels here for this because the 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock hour with the book fair is the class that I'm teaching, but then every other kid who hasn't got to go to book fair that day coming in at the same time. And so there will be times where I may or may not have assistance. I may or may not be able to have a volunteer. Thankfully today, my mother-in-law was a sub today, and I was like, hey, I need you here now. Come here now. And she could, so that was great. But yeah, there are times where we've gotten up to 50 to 60 kids in that library for book fair, and it's just like, all right. And you just kind of grab the table at the end of the day and say, did we lose any children? I don't care about the books. If we lost the books for book fair, none of the children escaped, right? Okay, that's good.
Well, and Hannah, it's also Friday. It's Friday after work. So, friends, I'm going to let Hannah go. Hannah, thank you so much. I know we talked about this earlier. You're not on social media. Friends, if you want to reach out to Hannah, reach out to me, and I will pass along your contact information, and you can make that connection with Hannah. Hannah, this has been an absolute gift. Thank you. It's truly inspiring. I wish you the very best the rest of the school year. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. I'm just going to fangirl again, hey, I got to do this.
Well, we're all very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Friends, be sure to check out today's show notes. Hannah has generously shared her full presentation as well as that standalone image for you to use and enjoy. Hannah also wanted me to include her Instagram and Threads account, which is @In Webster's Library. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more. See the link in today's show notes. And as I record this, I am juggling several outlines and tentative recording dates. You can be sure our upcoming episodes will showcase amazing school librarians sharing their strategies and resources. I hope you will tune in.